This is parents, and it is my parents. All we are is the union of our mother and our father, all of us. So in a way, it's a kind of self-portrait, but it's something that we all have in common and we all can relate to. There's a famous painting by John Singer Sargent. It's smaller, much smaller than this, and it's Robert Louis Stevenson and his wife. And in that painting, Robert Louis Stevenson's very lean. He's walking off to the side of the canvas on the left side, and his wife is on the right side, and she sort of has a shawl on, and her legs are sort of cut off. It's a little bit of a funky composition, but it was probably very quickly done. Beautiful painting. So I used that as the template for how I was going to compose this painting. I had been doing smaller paintings and probably darker paintings, more figures and interiors, when I decided to I put a skylight in my studio, and I decided to lighten it up a little bit. So at the time this painting was done, 1984, I considered it lightening my palette considerably. I'd also seen the work of David Hockney. David Hockney did paintings of his parents. There are several paintings of his parents that he did. There's a pyramidal triangular shape in the middle of it, which is symbolic of the mother and the father and the child. So I inverted it here to be symbolic of that reference. You'll notice too on this painting, it has some thicker paint on the wall back here behind. I had been to the Venice Biennale in Venice when I was traveling around the world on my traveling scholarship, my Crescent Traveling Scholarship from the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. And I had seen in one of the palaces a Balthus exhibition, an exhibition of paintings by Balthus. I'd never seen them before, I didn't know they existed, and it really provided an opportunity for me to realize a way that one could paint representationally in these times, figuratively. And it was sort of a bridge from Picasso, who I'd always loved, and some of the more traditional kind of painting that I liked, Andrew Wyeth and that kind of thing, and Norman Rockwell. It was a bridge between these things. And the Balthus paintings were. Balthus also had been very influenced by Wilhelm Hammershøi, who I learned about in that same trip. He did some paintings that almost looked like fresco paintings. The walls were sort of built up in pasto, and so I utilized that technique here. The painting is obviously about the parents. You've got the father, who's more gregarious, outgoing. You've got the mother, who's sort of inward, her eyes are closed. You've got the outside world, and she's inward. You have the closet door or some interior space. You've got the light switch, and you've got the outlet. You have the Arnolfini wedding portrait chandelier in between them. So another art reference where it's like you see reflected, we're reflected in that ball. It's a real, it comes together as a whole, but it's a real pastiche of all of my influences because I was just out of school. This is '84, I'd gotten out in '81, and so I was fresh out of school. And so I referenced Groundhog Day by Andrew Wyeth. He's got a beautiful painting of a table with a window and a plate and a fork and a knife. And so I was very consciously doing that here. At a time when Andrew Wyeth has sort of really fallen out of favor and wasn't very popular. A lot of the people that I liked as a student growing up were people that the teachers told me I shouldn't like, whether that was Norman Rockwell or Andrew Wyeth or even Balthus. My mom's wearing a green jacket like the masters, so I was like playing with I want to be a master too, that you still see the X from corner to corner. I divided the painting from corner to corner. I do this with all of my paintings, but I left the lines here. I left the guidelines so you could actually see how I constructed the painting, where my father stands and where my mother fits into it. It's all triangle upon triangle broken up. And many of my paintings are based on this, using the triangle as a motif and as a designing element. This was during the Reagan years. My father's got a little American flag, he's like, that tells you a lot. That one little smudge of red, white, and blue tells you a whole lot about his whole thing. My mom was very supportive of me as wanting to be an artist when I was a kid. She always gave me art supplies, and that really helped encourage me. It was a combination of the two. My father being outgoing and my mom being inward. And those two things are the two things that it takes, a kind of patience and will to be a painter, sustain it over a long period of time. Sidney Goodman was a teacher of mine at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. And Sidney Goodman, people have asked about what this breaking the plane here, where all of a sudden what is becoming sort of an illusion, you realize it's just a painting because it's got the flat underpainting, red on one side and blue on the other, what that represents. And I was really playing with that, acknowledging that it's a stage-like thing that I'm presenting. So I left that there. I did that in quite a few paintings around this time. And that had come from Sidney Goodman, who also did paintings of his parents, portraits of his parents. So he was a big influence of mine when I was a student at the Pennsylvania Academy. You can see that in some of his paintings where he actually has it's like he just wanted to change the composition, so he just put a line and let you just appreciate the top part and the bottom part. And I thought several times about editing that out and cropping it, but I decided to leave it. This would have been a very large painting for me at the time, so it was a big statement. And yes, when you paint your parents, you better have everything together. You better make sure that all the horses are driving at once, because it's a big statement. You don't want that to fail. You notice several things. She's got a little run in her stockings here, and that happened accidentally. I had the legs going off the edge of the canvas were too light, just her legs, so I glazed over them. I was going to work back into it and glaze over it so it would just not be quite as noticeable. And I started to take the glaze off with my finger and a little rag. I started to take it off, and when I did, I made that first mark, and I was like, oh, that looks like a run in stockings. So it was a perfect, quick little solution to a problem that I was having. You notice that I signed my name, James William Bo Bartlett III. That was, and even the angle of the signature is like John Singer Sargent. Like, I want to be John Singer Sargent. So I was young, and that was my full. And this was actually the last painting I ever signed. All after that, paintings might have little insignias on them or symbols, but no, this was the last painting that ever had my name signed on it. And that has to do with a whole bunch of reasons about ego and stuff that I don't think we need to go into. My mother never liked this painting. My mother said, why'd you have my eyes closed and why is there a run in my stocking? My dad always loved the painting. I mean, I remember she'd be putting on her stockings, her thumbnail would get on it, it would get a run on it, and she'd be, oh, I can't wear these. My mom would never wear stockings with a run on it. This reminds me of my childhood home when I was growing up, before we moved to 15th Avenue, which is where the home painting, object permanence is. This reminds me of my house that I lived in when I was 2½. You see how it's a relatively nice house, but they're just temporary residents here. They're just temporary residents with a folding card table, which was actually a table that they had. I mean, I borrowed this painting from them in Georgia and took it back to Pennsylvania and worked on it. And I started this painting, the studies for this painting in Georgia. Well, I always grew up with these wooden Venetian blinds, so I did those very specific to remind me of that feeling. And I think that's it.